The billionaire's voice shattered the quiet of the fancy restaurant. Every head turned, every fork froze mid-air. But no one expected what came next. Veronica, a young waitress, stood her ground against the mighty Carson Hail, a man known for crushing others with his words. That night, everything changed. One sentence, one moment. Watch till the end to find out how Veronica's quiet strength turned the tables. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow for more incredible stories. The rain poured heavily outside. The sound of it beating against the windows was a stark contrast to the tense silence in the restaurant. The Elysian table was known for its lavish decor and exquisite clientele. But tonight, it felt suffocating. Veronica could feel the weight of the room on her shoulders, the eyes of everyone on her, including Carson Hale's piercing gaze. She had been a waitress at this prestigious restaurant for over a year, enough time to know that the guests with money weren't always the easiest to serve. But Carson Hail was something else. He wasn't just a guest, he was a force, a media mogul, a billionaire whose name was synonymous with power and ruthlessness. And tonight, that power was aimed squarely at her. Veronica had seen her fair share of entitled customers, those who threw tantrums over the smallest inconveniences, who belittled the staff without a second thought. But none of them were like Carson Hail. The way he walked into the restaurant, all confidence and arrogance, made every head in the room turn. He had this aura, this unspoken command of the space around him. She had watched him from the corner of her eye as he sat at his table with his entourage, ordering with precision, his voice smooth but cold. But it wasn't until the moment he tasted his filet mignon that everything changed. "This is not medium rare." Carson's voice exploded, making everyone around him jump in their seats. He slammed the plate onto the table so hard that the glasses rattled. Veronica could feel her heart skip a beat. Her palms became clammy as she approached the table, trying to keep her breathing steady. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly, already reaching for the plate. "I'll have it replaced for you right away." But he wasn't done. Oh no, not by a long shot. "You think you can serve me this?" His voice was rising now, full of contempt, and it echoed through the room. "I pay thousands to eat here. This is a 5-star restaurant, not some college diner. You—" He stopped himself, glaring at her, his words hanging in the air like a threat. The tension was unbearable. Every eye in the restaurant was on them now. The waiters and customers alike holding their breath, unsure if they should intervene. But no one dared to. Veronica felt the heat rise to her face, her heart pounding in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. Taking a slow breath, she looked him in the eye. His anger was palpable, a storm ready to break. She could feel her own frustration bubbling beneath the surface, but she refused to let it show. She was not going to let this man, or anyone else for that matter, make her feel small. "Not tonight." "I treat everyone with respect, Mr. Hale," she said, her voice clear and steady, despite the tension building inside her. "Whether they're eating a sandwich or a steak, you're welcome to do the same." Her words were simple, yet they held power. A quiet defiance that echoed louder than any confrontation could. The room went dead silent. Not a sound, not a breath. Even the pianist, who had been softly playing in the background, missed a note. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Carson blinked, momentarily stunned by the calmness in her voice, the confidence that radiated from her despite the situation. For a split second, he didn't know how to respond. Veronica didn't wait for a reply. She picked up the plate gently, turned on her heel, and walked away. Each step felt like it took all the strength she had. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let it show. As she entered the kitchen, her heart was racing, but she was proud of herself. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't stooped to his level. She had stood tall. Back in the dining room, Carson sat frozen, staring at the spot where she had stood just moments ago. His entourage exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of what to make of the situation. For the first time in a long time, Carson didn't know what to do. His anger, which had fueled him for years, was replaced by something else, something unfamiliar. As Veronica went about her work, the tension in the room slowly dissipated. But Carson couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just the way Veronica had stood up to him. It was something deeper. He had spent years clawing his way to the top, building an empire on the backs of people like her. And yet, here she was, with nothing but her words, taking a stand that made him question everything he had become. When the moment passed, and he was finally left alone with his thoughts, he couldn't ignore the sense of discomfort that lingered. It wasn't just about the meal or the service. It was something more profound. Veronica had done what no one else had ever done to him before. She had made him feel small, not through anger, not through insults, but through quiet dignity. As the night wore on, Carson's mind kept returning to the same thought. Who was this woman, and why had she affected him so deeply? The evening ended quietly. Carson ate his meal in silence, his usual arrogance replaced by a strange sense of introspection. Veronica never glanced his way again, but every time she passed by, he noticed. Not just her professionalism, but the little things, like the worn shoes and the frayed edge of her apron, signs of a woman who worked hard, who gave everything and expected nothing in return. When it was time to leave, Carson did something he'd never done before. He didn't just leave a tip. He left a sealed envelope with Veronica's name written on it in neat, sharp handwriting. Without a word, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind a stunned staff and a woman who, in that moment, had no idea how deeply she had changed his life. As Veronica cleared the table, she found the envelope. Her heart raced as she opened, expecting a complaint, but instead her eyes widened in disbelief. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. Her hands trembled. This couldn't be real. Veronica's mind was spinning as she stood there, holding the cashier's check in her hands. For a moment, everything around her seemed to blur. The clinking of glasses, the soft murmur of customers finishing their meals, even the faint strains of piano music. None of it seemed real. All she could focus on was the check. $50,000. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was enough to pay off her student loans, cover months of overdue bills, and finally give her some breathing room. But still, something gnawed at her. Why? Why would Carson Hail, a man who had treated her like dirt just hours ago, leave her this money? She looked around, expecting him to still be there, watching her, perhaps with a smug grin on his face. But he was gone. The restaurant was now emptying out and the staff was beginning to clear tables. Veronica's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a deep, uncertain confusion. What kind of person would leave money like this and just walk away? It didn't make sense. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Veronica? It was the manager, Sarah, walking toward her with a puzzled look on her face. Sarah had been the one to train Veronica when she first started at Elysian Table. She was kind, but practical, always quick to spot the hard workers and just as quick to let go of those who didn't fit the mold. She was used to seeing everything at the restaurant through a professional lens. But tonight, something about Veronica's reaction caught her attention. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah's voice was gentle, but Veronica could hear the concern beneath. Veronica slowly nodded, her mind still reeling. I'm fine, Sarah, just a little shocked, that's all. She hesitated before adding, Mr. Hale left this for me. Sarah's eyes widened as Veronica handed her the envelope. Sarah took it, slowly opening it to reveal the cashier's check. Sighed. She let out a small gasp. Is this real? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. It's real, Veronica said quietly, almost as if saying it out loud would make it more true. But even as the words left her mouth, she could still hardly believe it herself. Why would he do this? I don't know, Sarah replied, shaking her head, her gaze flicking between Veronica and the check. She paused, then spoke more softly. Maybe he saw something in you tonight, something that made him want to make it right. Veronica looked at her manager, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Carson. Something that made him want to make it right. She didn't understand. Just hours ago, he had humiliated her, shouted at her in front of everyone. How could that same man now be the one to change her life? Veronica, Sarah said gently, pulling her back from her thoughts. You've been here for a long time. I've seen you work hard, always on your feet, always, doing your best. Maybe this is his way of saying, well, who knows what he's thinking. But for you, this could be a game changer. Veronica shook her head, her breath shaky. But I didn't do anything. I didn't ask for this. Her voice wavered with uncertainty. I just said what I felt. I wasn't trying to change anything, I was just defending myself. Sarah's face softened. Sometimes people see strength in others when they least expect it. You didn't back down. You spoke your truth. And maybe that made him realize something about himself. Veronica wasn't sure she agreed, but Sarah's words echoed in her mind as she walked to the back of the restaurant to put her apron away. The whole night felt like a whirlwind, and she just wanted to leave, to get away from the noise in her head. As she exited the restaurant, the rain had slowed to a light drizzle, but the cool air still cut through her thin coat. Veronica pulled it tighter around her and made her way down the street toward her small apartment. The city was quieter now, the streets wet and reflective, with the distant hum of traffic. But as she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something in her life had irrevocably changed. She clutched the check in her pocket, unsure of what to do with it, but somehow knowing it held the key to something much larger than money at eye. Home, she was met with the usual chaos. Her younger brother Mark was in the living room, watching cartoons on their old TV. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Hey, Veronica. How was work?" he asked, eager to hear about her night as always. Veronica smiled weakly, trying to shake off the weight of the evening. "It was fine," she said, though her voice didn't quite match the words. She went into the kitchen and set her bag down, glancing at the clock. It was late, but she didn't feel tired. Not yet. Not with everything swirling in her head. Mark followed her into the kitchen, sensing that something was off. "You look upset. What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing in concern. Veronica sighed, running a hand through her hair. She had always kept things from him, wanting to shield him from the harshness of life, but tonight she couldn't lie. "I don't know, Mark. Something happened at work tonight. Something I'm still trying to figure out." She pulled the check from her pocket and handed it to him. Mark's eyes went wide as he looked at the number written on the check. "Whoa, is this for real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Veronica nodded slowly, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Yeah. But the thing is, I don't understand why he gave it to me. After everything that happened, why would he?" She trailed off, lost in thought. Mark sat down beside her, looking at the check as if it might vanish if he blinked. "Maybe it's not about the money. Maybe he saw something in you, Veronica. Something he didn't expect. Maybe you made him think about things differently. You know, sometimes people change when they least expect it. Maybe this is his way of saying sorry." Veronica didn't respond. She simply stared at the check in her brother's hands, still not understanding what had just happened. She had always worked hard, kept her head down, and done her best. But tonight she had stood up, and now everything was different. But she knew one thing for sure. Whatever Carson Hale's reasons were, her life would never be the same again. Veronica sat motionless at the kitchen table, the check still clenched tightly in her hands. The words on the piece of paper were a blur, as if they were mocking her disbelief. $50,000. She had tried to convince herself it didn't matter, but the knot in her stomach grew tighter with every passing second. Her mind raced, reeling from the night's events. The sting of Carson's harsh words still lingered, and yet the weight of the check in her hand was almost more overwhelming. Why had he done this? Was it out of pity? A way to redeem himself? After humiliating her in front of the entire restaurant? Or was it something else? She didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Her younger brother Mark still sat beside her, trying to absorb the situation. He was quiet, watching her with wide eyes, unsure of what to say. He had always been her rock, her source of stability. But tonight, the roles had reversed. Veronica had always protected him from the harshness of the world. But now she found herself feeling just as lost as he did. "What are you going to do with it?" Mark asked, his voice small, uncertain. He had always looked up to her. She was the one who made things better, who handled everything. But now, he could see the confusion in her eyes. It made him nervous. Veronica's hand trembled as she placed the check on the table in front of him. She stared at it for a moment, as if hoping the answer would appear there. "I don't know," she whispered. "It doesn't feel right. It feels like a bribe, a way to make up for what he did. But it's too much. It doesn't make sense." Mark's brow furrowed as he picked up the check. "Maybe he's just trying to apologize," he suggested, his voice tentative. "Maybe he saw something in you. Maybe he respected you for standing up to him." Veronica shook her head, the feeling of betrayal still fresh. She had always known. Carson Hail was ruthless. She had heard the stories, the whispers about his treatment of staff, his tendency to fire people with a snap of his fingers. But that didn't prepare her for the humiliation she had felt tonight. And now this unexpected gesture, this overwhelming act of charity, only added to the confusion. It didn't sit right with her. It felt like a power play, a way for Carson to prove he was still in control, even after everything that had happened. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone vibrating on the table. She glanced at it, half expecting it to be a call from the restaurant, or worse, from Carson Hail himself. But when she saw the name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. It was Sarah, the manager from Elysian Table. Veronica had half expected her to call about the check, maybe to question what had happened, or to tell her that Carson had left instructions for her. But when she answered, Sarah's voice was nothing like she had imagined. "Veronica," Sarah said, her tone grave. "There's something you need to know. Carson Hail is gone. He checked out of the hotel, paid his tab, and left without a word. To anyone, his people are calling it a business trip, but they're not saying where he went. No one seems to know what's going on, but there's more. He's been in and out of meetings all day, and some of the staff are saying they've seen him acting strange, quiet, distant." Veronica's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it cracked. "What do you mean, acting strange?" "I don't know, Veronica," Sarah continued, her voice tinged with concern. "But there's something off about all of this. It's not like him. Something's changed. And I can't help but think it's because of what happened tonight." Veronica's mind whirled. She tried to make sense of Sarah's words, but the pieces didn't fit. Was Carson really changing? Or was this just another manipulation? Was he truly affected by what she had said? Or was this all part of some twisted game? She didn't know, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on her. "Don't worry about it for now," Sarah said, sensing her unease. "But I just thought you should know. Whatever happens next, keep your head up. You've done something no one else in that restaurant could have done tonight. You stood up to him, and that's more than anyone else has done." Veronica didn't respond right away. She was too busy processing everything Sarah had said, trying to find some semblance of truth in it. But in the silence that followed, a new thought began to form in her mind. Something that hadn't crossed her mind before. What if Carson's change wasn't just about her? What if this was about something bigger, something deeper? Something that went beyond her words and his actions. The rain outside had stopped, but the storm inside her was far from over. She felt a strange sense of foreboding creep up her spine as she thought about what might come next. Carson Hail was a man of power, a man who controlled the lives of so many people. But what if, just for once, he was the one who had lost control? What if, deep down, he was just as lost as she was? Veronica stood up abruptly, the check still on the table. She had to get out. The walls of her apartment felt too small, too confining. She needed air, she needed space to think, to breathe, and maybe, just maybe, she needed to face the reality of what was happening. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Veronica froze, her heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? It was late, and the only person who ever came by at night was Mark's friend from the neighborhood. But something in the back of her mind told her this time was different. She slowly walked to the door, every step measured, every muscle tense with anticipation. When she opened it, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall, well-dressed, and holding a small envelope in his hand. He looked vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place him. His presence was imposing, and the way he looked at her made her feel uneasy. "Are you Veronica Grant?" he asked, his voice cold and professional. "Yes," she replied, her voice shaky but steady. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer at first. He just handed her the envelope, his expression unreadable. Veronica hesitated, but then she took it. Her fingers brushed against the cool paper, and she felt a chill run down her spine. The envelope was heavy, as if it contained something far more significant than just a piece of paper. "Good evening," the man said, turning to leave before Veronica could say another word. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the envelope in her hand. She didn't need to open it to know it was from Carson Hail. He had found a way to remind her that she was still part of his world, that her life was still entwined with his in a way she couldn't yet understand. She didn't know what this new twist in the story would bring, but one thing was certain. Everything was about to change again. Veronica stood frozen in the doorway, the envelope still in her trembling hands. Her heart pounded as she looked at the man who had just left, vanishing into the night without a word. The weight of the envelope seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. She could feel it calling to her, pulling her in, but she didn't know if she was ready to open it. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her softly, as though she were closing the door on everything she thought she knew about her life. The rain had stopped, but the air felt thick with unanswered questions. She could hear Mark moving around in the other room, oblivious to the storm of thoughts swirling in her own mind. The envelope in her hand seemed almost alive now, its presence undeniable. It was as if Carson Hail had sent it with the intention of drawing her into a world she was not prepared for, a world of power, wealth, and decisions that could change everything. For a moment, she considered putting it aside, forgetting about it, continuing with her life the way she always had. But something inside her, something that had awakened when she stood up to Carson in that restaurant, pushed her to open it. She had come this far. She had faced down fear, humiliation, and uncertainty. She wasn't going to stop now. With a deep breath, she tore open the envelope, her hands shaking as she pulled out the letter inside. It was handwritten, the words flowing across the page in neat, elegant handwriting. Her eyes scanned the letter, each word feeling like it carried more weight than the last. "Dear Veronica, I never had the chance to thank you properly, and for that I apologize. Tonight you did something no one else has ever done to me. You made me reflect on who I am and what I've become. I've spent so many years building my empire, winning battles in boardrooms, making decisions that affected countless lives. But in doing so, I lost touch with what really matters. I lost touch with dignity, humility, and the true meaning of respect. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, that people are more than the roles they play or the money they make. They are human beings, each deserving of respect and kindness no matter their status. You've taught me that lesson more than you could ever know, and I can't help but feel that this is a turning point, not just for me, but for you as well. I've started a foundation in your name, the Veronica Grant Initiative. It's for women like you, women who work tirelessly, who sacrifice, and who never give up, even when the world gives them little in return. I want you to lead it. I want you to help me change the lives of those who need it most. Please consider this offer carefully. You've already done more than enough by showing me the kind of person I want to be. It's time for you to step into your own light. With respect, Carson Hail." Veronica sat down, the letter slipping from her hands as she struggled to breathe. She hadn't expected this. In her wildest dreams, she never imagined that Carson Hail, the man who had humiliated her in front of an entire restaurant, would now be offering her a chance to change the world. A foundation, a leadership role. All of it was so surreal. It was everything she had ever wanted for herself and for women like her, those who worked hard but never seemed to get ahead, those who were overlooked and undervalued. But with the offer came questions, and with those questions came fear. Was she ready for this? Could she really take on such a responsibility? Could she trust Carson Hail, a man whose actions had caused so much pain? And if she did accept, what would it mean for her life, for her future? Mark entered the room, his eyes flicking between Veronica and the letter. "What's that?" he asked, his voice full of curiosity. She looked up at him, her heart still racing. "It's an offer," she said softly. "From Carson Hail." Mark's eyes widened. "Wait, the billionaire?" She nodded, her mind still in a daze. "Yeah, he wants me to run a foundation to help women like us." Mark stared at her in disbelief. "That's incredible, Veronica." But Veronica didn't feel incredible. She felt terrified. This was a turning point, yes, but it was a turning point that carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't just being offered a job, she was being handed the chance to make a real difference in the lives of others. She could lift people up, give them hope, help them find their own voices in a world that often ignored them. But the responsibility was immense. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. "Do I even deserve this?" she asked, more to herself than to Mark. "I've spent my life just trying to get by, trying to survive. Now I have to lead? I don't know if I'm ready for that." Mark sat down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've always been ready. You just didn't know it. You've been a leader your whole life, Veronica. You've been leading by example. All you need to do now is step up." Veronica looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent her entire life protecting him, shielding him from the hardships of their world. But now it was time for her to stop running from the life she had always dreamed of. It was time for her to step into her own power. She glanced down at the letter again, and for the first time that night, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her moment, her chance to prove not just to the world, but to herself, that she was capable of so much more than she had ever realized. "I'm going to do it," she whispered. "I'm going to take this chance." Mark smiled, his pride evident in his eyes. "I knew you would." As Veronica stood up, holding the letter firmly in her hand, she knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But with courage in her heart and the support of those who believed in her, she was ready to face whatever came next. The woman who had once been humiliated, overlooked, and silenced, was now stepping into a world where she would no longer be invisible. Veronica Grant was ready to lead, and in doing so, she would change everything. This was her story, and it had only just begun.